Okay, so when we left Wisconsin, we arrived in Minnesota on the bridge across St. Louis Bay into Duluth. And we stayed along the shore of Superior and went north out of Duluth near the town of Two Harbor, Minnesota, and got a campground for a couple of days in the state forest. Welcome to Minnesota! And what did we do at Two Harbor?
At Two Harbors, we went downtown, which had a really cool trail that went kind of from one end of town to the other. It was paved. You could stay on the pavement, or you could kind of go out and walk a little closer on the shoreline. Went from like one end of town at a beach to the other end of town at the harbor, to the Lighthouse. And that was really nice.
And what was the name of the beach?
Agate Beach.
That's right.
And we had a couple of kids show us what we were looking for and sat there and picked up a few.
Which were agates?
Agates, yes. Yes.
Agate Beach on Superior in Two Harbor, Minnesota.
Pretty cool.
But the cool thing that we really liked about Two Harbor were the iron ore docks.
For sure, for sure.
And they were just fascinating. I've got quite a bit of video about that, but that was really cool.
These are the Two Harbors iron ore docks that were built in 1914 and are still in use today. And the trains come right out on the docks. The big ships come into the docks, and the train just dumps. Maybe they use the crane, but they just dump their payload right into the big ship holds that are carrying iron ore. And unless it's a really cold winter and there's like 14 inches of ice, then they can't get through. These docks are used year-round.
This is the Two Harbor Lighthouse. This is the breakwater built to protect the Two Harbor iron ore harbor, right across from the iron ore docks. This is the light at the end of the breakwater behind us. This tug is the Edna G, built in 1896 and still in use today at the iron ore docks in Two Harbor. The trains full of taconite or iron ore move along the top of this dock and download into hoppers, and there are 112 pockets, which are like chutes on the side of the dock, that will drop down into the hull of the boats and load the ore into the ships. Is how it works. The next day we followed the coastal road north out of Two Harbor, and we ended up at Split Rock Lighthouse.
Yes.
Tell us about that a little bit.
Let's see. Split Rock is built on this like 100-foot tall rock And so when
it's up on a cliff.
up
Yep.
on a cliff, yeah. And so when the industrialists got Congress to build it, there were no roads, and everything had to come in by boat. And they built an elaborate winch, and had to like kind of winch everything up the side of this cliff. So that was like the first thing they built, so that they could get all the supplies it needed for the buildings that are up there. Well, I can see the path down there, the steps, I guess.
I would think that would make sense.
This is the Split Rock Lighthouse in, oh, I think Silver City, Minnesota. They claim that it's probably the most visited lighthouse. It's certainly the most visited lighthouse in Minnesota on Lake Superior here. It was built as a result of, oh gosh, I don't know, a number of shipwrecks that happened in November of 1905 due to a terrible November gale and a number of ships and supplies, iron ore, being lost.
This is our campground for the next couple of nights. It's Indian Lake Campground in the Cloquet Valley State Forest of Minnesota. 17 nights, $17 a night, and as you can see, the site is huge. Currently, I don't know that there's anybody in here besides the campground host and us. So, quite quiet. There's, of course, a lake and a couple of loons. There are privies, vault toilets, but honestly, the mosquitoes are so bad in there, they will eat you alive. So we put up our own little shower tent and our portable toilet. But other than that, it's just fantastic. Little swimming beach.
An interesting thing that happened on the way, I think was really cool. We were driving north and we pulled into this town called Silver Bay, and there was a huge industrial complex, smelter, right there on the bay, and it was an iron pellet manufacturer. So they took the iron ore and turned it into pellets rather than the raw product like was shipped out of Two Harbors. But we went
and
up,
then they shipped it from right there.
Yeah, and then they
that
shipped
was a
it,
harbor.
Yeah, right there from the factory.
Yeah.
So we went up to the overlook that was there, and there was this older gentleman. I think he said he was 82, 84, and retired school librarian, and had done all kinds of odd jobs to help make ends meet in the summer, including he got his seaman's card, and he worked just for 2 weeks in a kitchen on some boat. But the fella that
you had to have a reference.
Yeah, you had to have a reference, and the fella that was his reference was one of the captains of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Not the captain when the ship went down, but the captain right before that. And I just thought that was like talking to a living treasure.
Okay, so we left there and we moved further up the coast to Grand Marais.
Grand Marais means great swamp, or big swamp.
I haven't really seen a swamp around here, but
Oh, no, I think sort of, yeah.
it's a
We
cool
have
little town on Superior.
very little town. Kind of feels almost like you've reached the end of something, even though there's more to go. Real small town, but
They got a great local community radio
yes,
station
yes,
that reminds us of the radio station on Northern Exposure.
yeah,
And
WTIP.
the biggest controversy that people are really up in arms about in Grand Marais is there is not going to be bingo at the Lions Club picnic
Yes.
this year, and people are just outraged about it and calling each other names. So.
And not gonna go.
Yeah, they're boycotting it because of the bingo. But
Yeah.
anyway.
And at Grand Marais, we're staying at Two Island Lake Campground, which is in the National Forest. And it's just, that's where we're sitting this afternoon. It's just gorgeous up here. Nice site, nice campground.
Okay, and so we've done a few things here. We drove 50 miles north of here up the coast all the way to the Canadian border to Grand Portage National Park.
Yes, and Grand Portage translates to the Big Carry. And Grand Portage, it was the rendezvous spot of the voyageurs coming in their 23-foot long canoes from Montreal, who came up and across the Great Lakes to meet with the Native American trappers to buy beaver pelts for the hat makers and milliners in Europe. And so Grand Portage was established as the rendezvous point for that, but it was called Grand Portage because they wanted to go up the Pigeon River and
to get to the interior
to
of
get
Canada.
to the interior, yeah, and through like what's now the Boundary Waters. But there were rapids and waterfalls on the Pigeon River, so they had to get out and for 8.5 miles carry their canoes, carry their supplies. Every voyageur, which was the guys who paddled on the canoes, was responsible for carrying 2 bales, which could have either been pelts, depending if they were coming one way, or trade goods, you know, trinkets, if they were going the other way. And each bale weighed 90 pounds. And each voyager was expected to muster 2 of those, along with helping carry the canoe on the portage. So that was really cool.
They would go about 1/2 mile and then sit down and have a pipe. And then they'd get up and go about another 1/2 mile and then have a pipe. So you definitely took up smoking so you'd get a break.
Lacrosse kind of stuff. Lacrosse? Yeah.
Traditional lacrosse?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I always have fun because
Yeah, so we got cedar. This is, I just started this. Anyway, I just started this. This is a cedar strip canoe covered in birch bark, basically. Okay, but they start with the birch bark first. Okay, as a canoe. I'm gonna pull this down, get some of that. It's huge.
besides going to Grand Portage, we went up to Grand Portage State Park, which is right on the Canadian border.
Yeah, you can see
and
the
that's where you can see the falls.
and
That's where you can see the falls and the rapids, and the reason for the Grand Portage.
I was pretty shocked by how high the falls were. I've actually kind of been surprised by the terrain here in northeastern Minnesota on the lake here. They call it the North Shore, by the substantial large hills, very small mountains, but a lot hillier than I would have thought.
Yeah, a lot hillier.
Yeah.
Also, I must say about the Grand Portage, the Ojibwe and the Native American people have been using it for the Grand Portage, the trail itself, for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Before they ever came in contact with the fur traders. And it's still a trail that you can hike. It's 8.5 miles one way, and you can hike the 8.5 trail, you can hike the 8.5 mile trail and camp. There's campsite. At the other end, it was called Fort Charlotte, the other end of the Portage. And you can camp there and then hike back. That'd be a fun thing to do. Oh, there's a Canadian over there. Okay, so that was really cool. I'd always wanted to see that.
Right, because Chuck's ancestors
Right,
were those voyagers
my
and
French
trappers.
Canadian ancestors were those people. So, also right here at Grand Marais is something called the Gunflint Trail that we had no idea, we had never heard of. And it's about a 60-mile road that shoots straight up north out of Grand Marais up to the boundary waters, up to the Canadian border. Very just isolated. There's a bunch of camps, canoe trails, different things up there.
An old trail that is now paved road.
Yep.
Really, really remote.
Yeah.
But beautiful. Really beautiful up there.
We drove up. Didn't take any video. There was really nothing to video, but we did spend a day doing that. That was a fun day. Didn't see any moose. We looked everywhere, but didn't see any.
We did stop at a museum/nature center.
Yeah.
Called, oh gosh, Chickiwalk, native name. That was really, really neat. It had a museum of watercraft, so it had like lots of handmade canoes. It had a canoe that the woman ordered from Old Town out of Maine in 1929 that had to be put together when it got there. And it had a really cool nature center for children. That was neat. We enjoyed that. And then a museum that was really a museum of the local people and how they survived, both the natives who'd been there, you know, forever, and Europeans who moved into the area. And it was neat. It had a lot of interesting information about local families who lived there year-round.
Okay, and then today we just went down to Grand Marais and rode our bikes around the harbor and ate some fish and chips. It was quite good. I had the herring.
Delicious.
Susan had the white fish. I had the herring. And we walked out on the breakwater. I've got some video of that, but that's pretty much been it. you back there?
I am back there. Hi.
Where are we at?
We are at the Grand Marais breakwater on the north shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota.
Very good.
And it's gorgeous.
Grand Marais Harbor. The Minnesota North Shore shoreline, and look at those big hills in the distance. I had no idea Minnesota had hills.
Oh, look at that building.
Where we had lunch, right across the harbor. Fish and chips, of course. This is our campground in Grand Marais. We're at Two Island Lake Campground in the Superior National Forest. Here's our private trail to the lake.
To our private beach.
Yes. All right, we will say fare thee well, Nomies.
Fare thee well.
We'll try to get back with you in about a week or so if we can get this loaded tomorrow.
Don't forget, go to YouTube and like and subscribe.
See ya. Bye,
Bye.
Nomies.